I simply drove to this person's house right away when I was feeling this rejection and said, listen, I'm sitting outside in the car if you want to come out and talk, you know? But I didn't go to the door and knock. I didn't want to intrude. I want to respect his freedom. But at the same time, I wanted to say, hey, let's move on and see what's happening. And if things need to shift and if I have missed some things, please.
Welcome to another episode of What It's Like to Be You. My name is Josh Levine, your host. Today, my guest is Bob Fecas, who is a social self-pres 2-1 279 trifix. Bob is a spiritual advisor and mentor, a teacher at a Catholic high school in the Atlanta area from 1988 to 2016, and he leads retreats on prayer and meditation and other aspects of spiritual life. Bob was also a childhood friend of Don Riso, and when Don was writing personality types back before in the 70s, Bob was one of the first people ever to read the chapter on type 2. Bob has been a man of faith since he was a boy, and he's a very big and fun personality, especially with that 2-7 stem right up front. And in this conversation, we explore various aspects of his 2-ness, including when he was very young, being inspired by the saints for their example of being a caring and loving and good person on earth, for how he connects with his students and how he responds when he notices that people are being relationally distant from him, and also just how positive and buoyant he is as a human being. This conversation is really energetic, and it's really hard not to like Bob. He's very charismatic and charming, and you'll notice that in addition to exploring his inner life as a 2, there are also just moments that Bob is being a 2 with me in this conversation in a really lovely way. So I'm very excited for you to observe and learn about type 2 from my friend Bob. I was thinking about our last conversation, and you were going to potentially think of some examples of in your life of this, like leading in or moments where you caught yourself
Yes.
in the unconscious assumption that what you were doing for the person is the thing that was going to really make the difference for them.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I did give it some thought, and
Uh-huh.
I'm sure I came up with more examples. I had mentioned, the pulling back of 2 particular friends in my past and how that
Right.
made me feel. And
Right.
it wasn't so much that I thought I was making the difference in their life or anything, but I certainly thought that we had a kind of relationship that I could sort of presume that I would be included in a way that it didn't seem that the breakup uh, did include. In other words, I was
Mhm.
disappointed that I got wrong certain things about the relationship.
Right. Right.
Whether really about the whether I was at fault or the other person was at fault, or whether it wasn't about fault, but it was just about the evolution of things. But the disappointment was certainly over my failing to get something,
Mhm.
to see something,
Yeah.
and that I thought I had seen, and I didn't
Right.
see. At least the breakup indicated that I was missing something.
Right. This is thank you for bringing this up, first of all, because just losing a friend is really a tender subject. And I think we've all been there and can relate, and it's a universal human disappointment. But I think in particular for type 2,
Absolutely.
that's
Yep.
a real wound,
Yep.
because
Yep.
I'm thinking of how 2 sort of um, has this need to feel like they have a special place in the other person's life. you know um I've got my special sliver of this, that my connection with this person is special, and what I give to this person is special to them, and our connection is special, and so the loss of that is, I can imagine, really, really hard. So I just wonder what other words you have for it, or what those
Yeah,
experiences were
I
like.
I think, I mean, there was a kind of, I wasn't angry at things, and I don't think I'm repressing anything there. There was a greater sadness, just a sadness over the breakup,
Yeah.
and the lost opportunities that as I saw it, that we would not have those opportunities in the future together. And
Right.
so I think sadness is a word that has resonance with my own losses in the past that I've,
Sure.
not just with relationships, but especially with relationships. I'm thinking of the one most recent one, and I can remember at this 70th birthday party that was thrown for me by my students, and this person was one of my students, and some of the people were standing up and saying things about Mr. Fecas and so on.
Uh-huh.
I fully expected this student to say something,
Right.
didn't say anything, and was rather removed from the whole affair
Sure.
of my being the center of attention, or my
Right.
getting um, and I was including this person myself, and sort of, whoa, what's going on? And there was at
Yeah.
my daughter's wedding also, this person um, was also um, more removed.
Mm.
When we're together, I saw a great deal of sharing, and a great deal of going to films, reading books, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Um, this
Yeah.
person's relationship with the beloved, and my relationship with my wife, and our sharing things, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, when we were in group, and the first relationship, it was somewhat the same, because the person said finally that we pulled apart. He was saying because of a certain jealousy. He said he felt a certain jealousy. I mean,
I see.
he
Okay.
was owning something that he wasn't
Yeah.
um you know so anyway, I don't know if that's helpful.
It is. And actually, I'm tracking. It's interesting to me how you are tracking the state of a person's closeness or removedness from you. And I mean, that is, I'm thinking social instinct, but also it has a particular two-ness. What I'm wondering is I think where the two-ness really will come, like the texture of two-ness will come forward, is in your inner response. Like what happens, or what would your reflex be when you notice someone being removed
Yes.
in that way?
Yes. I mean, an alert goes on,
Yeah.
and the mind is questioning, well, what's happening here? Is it me? Is it the other person? Or is it a complex of things? The environment that we're in at this moment? I don't think I immediately. Um, I was reflecting, Josh, on the fact that when I entered the Jesuits at the age of 18, and Don Riso and we were together and so forth. We had in our novitiate years, the first 2 years, a structure called the speculum, which is mirror in Latin. And the speculum was to be done by our classmates. And we were instructed on how to go about reflecting on this other person. We were supposed to really fill out one for each of the people in our class, and it was supposed to be somewhat objective and dispassionate. But and we were getting, so what I'm trying to get at is the fact that we were already at 18 being raised to be more reflective about ourselves. There was we worked on our predominant fault, for example, which the
Hmm.
speculum was somewhat helpful in identifying, along with other work that we did. This was before the Enneagram had come with any popularity into the
Sure.
Jesuit order, which it did in Canada, which is how Don Riso got into the Enneagram. Was with his work in the Jesuits when he was in the theologate there. But I'm so I don't think my typical response is unconscious. I think I tend to be rather looking at the variables and saying, well, causation here.
Yeah, it's
What?
like a diagnosis. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I do think that, but I am a two in the, insofar as we cut the pie up in these ways, and it makes sense to me to use these structures. I have been benefited by these structures, and I did look over your article on object relations.
Oh,
I didn't read it thoroughly, but I got
okay.
I got the gist of it, and would like to go
Huh.
back to it. But in any event, I'm just trying to say that my response to these things tends not to be, sort of, but it tends to be more inquisitive and more diagnostic.
Hmm.
Let's get to the heart of this, and I would like to talk with the person.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
my
There. Yeah. Yeah.
whereas, for example, with the second case, the more recent case of I simply drove to this person's house right away when I was feeling this rejection and said, listen, I'm sitting outside in the car if you want to come out and talk.
Right. There you go. Okay. That's
you
pretty
know
good.
but I
Yeah. Yeah.
didn't go to the door and knock. I didn't want to intrude. I want to
Sure.
respect his freedom, but at the
Yeah.
same time I wanted to say, hey, let's move on and see what's happening, and if
Right.
things need to shift, and if I have missed some things, please. So I tend to be somebody who's ready to engage
Right.
rather than
Right.
someone who pulls back and immediately defends.
Right.
And
Right.
I mean, I think that is my training.
I think I agree. I was just thinking that it's training, um, but and also it's remarkable that you drove to the person's house. There's a going to the other person that that speaks to.
Yeah, yeah,
In this case, literally physically,
yeah.
and the awareness in you of um how far, or let me put it, how how close can I get to the other person before it's an intrusion?
That's right.
Yeah.
To me, and I think that the idea of autonomy and freedom is really important to me.
Mm,
As you know, us twos, to be self-defining, even to a fault, as we know in your article there. But
sure. Sure.
uh, but I do tend to be respectful and err on the side of taking maybe more time than was really needed, or what have you. But I would rather do that way. And I think in my teaching too with my students, I tend not to. Uh, so I mean, this example just came to me. One of my students came into class, senior ethics class, and flung his book bag up against the air conditioning heating unit and
Hmm.
slouched down in his and put his head down. And then other people gradually start coming in. I didn't say a word to this
Hmm.
kid.
Hmm.
Didn't say a word. But then
Yeah.
we started the class and so forth. And this is so two-ish. And we started the class, and I'm talking and I'm bringing something up. And I walk around my class and all of that. And he's got his head down. I just put my hand on his shoulder when I was laughing about something or something, very casually. And I was very
Sure.
physical with my students. I mean,
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
how I wasn't fired, today in
Okay.
today's
Right.
in
Sure.
today's world, I would never make it. I would never.
Okay.
We were told, you could only do side hugs, and
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I'm still hugging everybody, and
Yeah.
and and some of us are kissing and all that kind of thing. So I just put
Mhm.
my hand on this kid, and I could feel his body just so relax. Never said anything. He came to me later, and we became good friends in the sense, I mean, not one of my better friends as
Mhm.
far as
Mhm.
student teacher relations go, but I just that sort of tendency on my part to want to respect boundaries
Yeah.
is real, I think.
Yeah. There's a way, like, that story is really evocative for the aspect of two that is just, there's a radar sort of always on for if a person's in some kind of suffering or pain, and kind of what you can do to help. And I guess what I'm sensing is in you there is this constant inner conversation of what's the what's the calibrated thing that I can do to just let that person know that I'm noticing them and that I'm kind of here for them, and
Mhm.
I'm available.
The
The gaze.
gaze that you
That's right.
write. Yeah,
That's right. That's
yeah,
right. Yeah,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
giving this person gaze,
Yes, yes.
and then kind of tracking the response to it in a certain
Hmm,
kind of way.
hmm.
Yeah.
And I hope, as I was doing with the light here, I hope, and I think it's true, partially again because of my training, both at home and with the Jesuits, I think it is, by and large, for the sake of the well-being of the person, and not that I don't appreciate being appreciated and loved.
Mm.
Absolutely, I do. I've had far more of that than most, I suspect, far more
Mm.
response. Um, but even the people that like this person who's broken with me over the last 5 years or so, I still sort of, this is 2ish, I still sort of expect this person to come to the door of my he's been here many times. My wife loves him, my children love him, it's um and that this will be patched up. I still fully expect that this will be resolved,
Hmm.
not only at the level of my hope, but even more
This is you're talking about the
objectively.
friend. You're talking about your friend
Yes,
that. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
that broke
Yeah.
up, That's
Right.
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 So
Yeah.
this calibrate, and these tentacles out there picking up,
Hmm.
and how am
Hmm.
I to respond and so forth to, and and
Yeah.
if it were to, I mean, there's no question that there'd be work to be done, and at some point some um, uh, revisiting of certain things that would be difficult, no question. But
Uh huh.
that's what we do with friends. I mean, that's what we do with our beloveds, is that we have to constantly rewrite history in trying to understand, well, what really did take place, and what about, what do I have to apologize for something because I want to, if I should? That whole should thing is really big. I have this strong one wing, so
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
um,
So one of the things that we were tracking with the light thing right before we turned the
yes,
record button on is
yeah.
this question of, am I motivated by um, actually helping this person, or by their appreciation that I
Yeah,
would get
getting a
for helping
response
that? Yeah,
from them for my helping. Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
Mhm.
So how do you
Mhm.
track that for yourself, and like what's your relationship with that?
Uh-huh. Um, well, just the recognition of the distinction is really important to me.
Right.
And when Don Riso was writing his first book, he gave my wife and me a copy of our types that he had just
Okay.
typed, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he said,
Uh-huh.
"Read this." I had never heard of the Enneagram or anything of that sort, and I mean, he had said a few things about it, and I was rather suspicious of the quote numerology and all.
Right.
I
Yep.
read it, and I was just, you know, amazed,
Uh-huh.
as was Catherine, amazed at how, and so he and I dialogued a good bit about that. He even gave me a credit in his first book for encouraging him to pursue not only the unhealthy side of the types, but what about the genius and the essence of the types, as Hudson has gone on and given presentations on the
Hmm.
essence of the various types. So
Right.
I think the distinction between, for its own sake and for my sake, that distinction is really important to me in philosophy and psychology, and I feel called to attend to the former. And I feel in my faith and in my understanding of reality that I'll be taken care of. I'll get my needs met if I tend first and foremost to the thing for its own sake. Helping out Josh with the lighting because he would like to get and oh yeah, by the way, Josh is happy with me. That's the secondary thing, is that
Yeah. Yeah.
Josh thinks well of Bob because Bob was assisting in his work that he's doing with these interviews.
Right. This point you're bringing about faith is really interesting to me. I think that there is a an inner shift that can happen from, let's see how I would put this, uh, needing other people to meet your ego's needs versus turning to a higher source, whatever your faith orientation is. Um, Sort of having a relationship with, I'll use the word God, and letting God be the person who, or the entity or whatever that sees you.
Yes, yes,
Uh,
yes. And
you
that's been
know,
the case
yeah,
since, I mean, the truth is, since I was a boy, I
right.
can remember my mother taking my brother Steve and me to to church, to the Eucharist, and
Mm.
we would plop down in the pew, and then she would kneel down and bow her head, and well, I didn't know it was prayer at that moment, but where is she going, and what is she doing, and why did she leave us, and those kinds of questions, and my fascination with the transcendent
Mhm,
from
mhm.
the beginning has been a major part of my life, no question
Yeah.
about it.
I
And
I'm just
go ahead.
I'm fascinated by the, not to reduce it to this, 'cause I don't think it can be reduced to this, but faith in a higher order, a higher entity, a higher being of some kind, um, or however you conceive of God, serves a really interesting and important psychological function, which is a kind of like it takes the pressure off of other people in your life to give you your kind of narcissistic hits.
Yes,
You know what I'm saying?
I do.
Like, uh, like for example, as a 3, I could see, needing to be loved and admired by all the people in my life versus turning to a higher order to receive it from that
Yeah, yeah,
instead, or as a more personal and intimate substitute or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm dropping that here
Yeah,
as I think
and
it really,
I would say
yeah,
that that certainly in the Christian tradition in which I am
yeah,
a participant, uh, the synthesis has been stressed. How in John's first letter is, how can you love God whom you don't see if you don't love your neighbor whom you do see? That whole idea about the connection
mhm,
between the human and the divine, uh,
yeah,
you know, and so I do think that I have been, um, by virtue of my faith, um, saved. I mean, even the fact that I mean, I don't think I get angry. I'm not saying I never go to 8. I'm not saying that my kids would tell you. I tend to be rather calm, and if I lower my voice and say something like, "And look now, look," if I say now, look, and I've
mhm,
got the eyes I am moving very rapidly to 8, and my kids know the system. And so when they were younger and living at home, they say, Dad, please don't go to 8 right now.
okay,
And whenever
yeah,
they did that, they were right. Whenever they said, Dad, please don't go to 8, or if Catherine ever said, Bob, please, I knew they could not be wrong. They could not be
mm,
wrong.
mm,
So, but I do think that the sadness term that I used rather than the angry term um, is 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 part of the fact that unmerited suffering. I mean, the victimization of the two, um, the unmerited suffering. I do think all of us, regardless of what all human beings are abused. And I do think that I have had my share in that. And I do think that my faith in um, the place that, let's say, Jesus of Nazareth and the saints in the church, I don't just mean the ones on the canon, but I mean those who also participate in this faith that I share with the Christian tradition. I think they have consoled me, no doubt,
sure,
have
yeah,
consoled me in my unmerited suffering, let's say.
yeah,
And so you're bringing up that junction between the faith issue and the one-on-one with real flesh and blood human beings
that's right,
whom you would like to have respond to you at times, but I know that given the degree of my belief in the transcendent, that that it is a, I wouldn't call it a cushion. I mean, if you could look at all the books I've got, Rumi and Meister
mhm,
Eckhart and Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross, I am buoyed up by this faith, and I
yeah,
feel that my disappointments, let's say in human relationships,
yeah,
always are couched in that larger um, uh, love that
yeah,
that I receive
yeah,
from above, from the divine, from the transcendent, from the ground of being, etc.
Yeah, yeah. Well said. And can do you have texture for let's see. I'm thinking of the two and 7 as we talked about as
Yes.
kind of both live in you tendency to present the silver lining.
No question. No
I'm wondering
question.
if you have texture about that thing that you feel consoled about. You know, like what like the disappointments that you're describing. And we talked a little bit about the grief around the lost friendships, but even
Yeah.
just micro moments, you know, where you just I don't know, even yesterday or today or something, like wanting to be seen in a certain way by someone and then being missed, you know, and then
Yeah.
that being a thing that gets consoled and kind of washed away
Yeah.
or elevated or something like that in your but what is that grief?
Because by definition, you can't be, quote, missed your word. By the way, we should talk about that sometime. That was one of the things my antenna went up when I saw you stressing so much which is how Don did in the beginning, and how so
Uh-huh.
much Enneagram work is on deficiency, and
I
it
see.
doesn't look enough at genius and
Sure, sure. Okay.
gift, I think. But in any event, um, I think that the transcendent has certain. If I don't want to just repeat myself here, I want to get at. Let me go to something that you made me think of a minute ago. Shakespeare, Hamlet, when Gertrude says, "Methinks she doth protest too much." We twos are famous for overstating. I do think we twos um, are hard to believe for many people because of our enthusiasm. I mean, the enthusiasm word we typically think of with the 7, but the 2's and the 7's have
Oh,
such.
twos have a certain flavor of it too, for sure.
That's
Yeah.
right, no question.
Yeah, that's right.
Ours may be
Yeah.
focused on relationship and
Yeah.
person, and 7's are on whatever their obsession is at the moment. Not a long-lived obsession, as we know. 7's attention span is not really that great, but in any event, a 2 can be pretty long-lived in focus when it comes to a beloved, a person.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
but I do think that we have that tendency in this leaning in to. I mean, I can remember Catherine telling me at times now, don't over promise the kids things. Don't over express the plans for the summer or and the grandiosity of the 2
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
such that I think um, we do profess more than is the case and can be thought of and sometimes are less sincere
Right.
than we would like to be. I mean, we,
Yeah.
we would
Yeah.
like to think of ourselves, given the image that we're constructing of ourselves, we would like to think of ourselves as that, as purely sacrificial, etc. But we're not. Of course, we're not. And of
Hmm.
course, we fall short not only of our own image, but of the ideals presented in the religious and wisdom literature, philosophical wisdom literature of the species that some of us read and are nourished by. I would like to be very much like some of the people whose books I have down here. I do think who twos can be, as we've said, they can be angry with others for not satisfying their needs. I think of C.S. Lewis, I think may have mentioned that, The Four Loves, Mrs. Fidget, after all I've done for you, the Jewish mother syndrome,
Sure.
where,
Uh-huh.
after
Uh-huh.
all I've done for you, and this is what I get. I
Right.
haven't myself felt that. I've just felt hurt and sad over
Hmm.
things like the relationship. Um, and not for what I have done, but for what we've had. I mean, wasn't this real? And why
I see.
now
Yeah.
not? Um, I think some twos really do despise the human. They portray themselves as lovers of mankind, but if you look more deeply, they are furious with mankind. And
Yeah.
I don't think that's my case, but and maybe it's because of this religious buffer that you're referring to as
Sure.
the satisfaction. I'm having my needs satisfied in this constant reference to um, the unconditional love of the divine,
Mm,
you know,
yeah.
no
Yeah.
matter, and I believe I fall short all the time of what I think I am called to, and so forth. But I also think those scenarios and scripts that I look to follow are part of my construction, and they're faulty as such. And so I'm continuing to read and to study and to meditate and to pray, so that my perception of what I am called to is indeed closer to the mark than
Hmm. Yeah.
than yeah,
Yeah. You've been a man of faith for almost your entire life,
my
right?
entire
Or
life.
for your whole life.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Not to say that I haven't had my doubts and that I haven't been challenged at that
Uh-huh.
level.
Yeah. I'm thinking about our last conversation where you talked about how as a young boy you related to you were so inspired by the saints
Yep, yep.
and
Still,
and
still.
and you yeah and you felt called to be a man of faith and a conduit for it. Can you talk about
Or
that
I
really?
would say a conduit for the good, the holy.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
Yeah.
um, and not that I would expect that other people would have the faith that I have or see things the way I do, but that
Uh-huh.
the generosity of the saints and the goodness of the saints is something that I
Yeah.
don't find myself motivated more than by the lives of people who and they're not, like I say, all on the canon. Some of them
Yeah.
are people dead set against the faith that I practice, etc. Like my one of
Mm.
my dearest best friends that I talk with almost, he is an atheist and despises some of my stuff, but we love one another, and so we have fun teasing and all of that. Um,
He-
but
yeah.
go back, Josh. What were you were
Yeah,
asked?
I'm curious about what it was like
Yeah,
as a young boy
yeah,
in discovering the lives of the saints
yes,
and your connection with that.
yeah,
Your like and I'm thinking of it being particularly two-ish in the sense that it's like this the here's the flavor I'm kind of after is these examples of people who devoted their lives to loving and caring and being sources of good in the world
yeah,
and how that resonated with you at this kind of soul level very early on.
yeah. Well, I
And
mean, I
yeah.
was I can remember vividly being in the third, fourth, fifth grade when I was walking to mass to serve mass um,
Yeah.
uh, as a boy. 2 miles walking church, and school was right there. So often I would stay on either with breakfast that I brought, or the nuns would sometimes have me come in. But but the readings of the scripture, the portrayal of the early martyrs and saints as a boy, that definitely inspired me. And then, of course, the liturgy that went with the Catholic Eucharist. At that time, we used a lot more incense, and it's still used. But
Uh-huh.
I was really captured by that. And this is also, I have to say, in Charleston, South Carolina, which is a largely Protestant environment still to this day. But the Catholic community, though small, was vibrant. And maybe it's because of the dialectic with the Protestant community that we felt our identity more. I think I told you last time that they were like, I think we had 12 or 13 of our 80, 90 something seniors who entered religious life. I mean, we were studying to be
Yeah.
priests and nuns. And so the effect of our teachers on us, who also were motivated by the lives of people before them. I mean, this tradition of being inspired by others, I don't know. I don't know how to see life but in connection with those who, if they did not create my values, they certainly express sympathetic values, values that I resonate with, and I can't imagine my life. Every day I read about different biography, and autobiography has always been a major source of nourishment for me,
Yeah.
and the lives of ethical and religious saints have nourished that.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about your life as a teacher, as what are the words that you would use to describe your
A
kind of
mentor. I mean,
yeah,
that's a very two.
yeah, yeah.
A two sees himself, herself, not just as a teacher of a subject, but as somebody creating an environment in which relationships are going to thrive. And
Yeah.
and
Right.
and some I mean, I've always had, as a teacher, from the beginning, good relations with my students. Not that I haven't been. Um, had trouble with some students and been
Mhm.
rejected and sneered at by students. Absolutely. How could
Yeah.
you? You can't please everybody, but I have definitely this. To me, here's I can remember articulating that. In the teaching environment, we have the students, we have the teachers, we have the subject matter. All three have their place, their rights, etc. But really, the students are the really, really important. I mean, they're the living beings before us, and hopefully, the subject matter um, that we're presenting will nourish them and help them into maturity and autonomy. And that's as a two, I know that I'm focused more on the student than I am, but at the same time, I was the hardest grader in our department. This is sort of that one thing, the one
Mhm.
wing.
Mhm.
My chairperson said, "Do you realize you have the lowest grades in our department, and maybe you're the most popular teacher?" I said, "Well, I don't know about that, but I know I didn't. I didn't know about that."
Hmm.
I said, and I've had, and my chairperson said, she said, and I get little to no complaint from parents about you, and yet you give
Mhm.
them C's and D's.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Yeah.
so this balance between the two and the one. My mother was a one, and
Mhm.
I have a fair amount of that. I'm interested in the subject matter. I
Yeah.
love studying philosophy and theology. So this balance between wanting to be of assistance, but also inspired by ethics or the lives of the heroes that have gone before us and so forth. So trying to work out this balance in my teaching so that it isn't just about the kids and it isn't just about having fun, although I do think that, as Whitehead said, if there's no enjoyment, there's no growth, there's no learning. And so
Yeah.
enjoyment in class was important for me. And there'd be times when I could tell, especially after lunch, I'd say, "Okay, kids, I see what's going on. Give me 15 more minutes, and you can have the last 20 to do whatever you want. 15 concentrated minutes. I'm the judge as to whether you've succeeded or not." But I would make these compromises to try to existentially deal with what's possible in this moment.
Yeah. Um, Let me take a breath because I'm tracking a few things that I want to
Go
pull
ahead.
out.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see. Um,
I'm amazed at how good you are. I mean, I don't see you looking at notes, and you've digested so much, as is clear in your article there. You've digested so much of the Enneagram, and so your antennae are up there, and you're tracking. You're tracking.
Thank you. Well, actually, that moment was really good and demonstrative from a two point of view because at this in our last conversation there were these moments where you would notice something about me uh and compliment me, and I really appreciate it. It's really nice to hear,
Yeah, yeah.
but that is particularly, I would say, two-ish,
Oh, it is. It
you
is.
know,
We're
the way that
very
you just did
encouraging
that.
and
Yeah.
supportive and all. But I also think objectively you're gifted.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll try to let that land.
And I'm not
um
getting any. I'm not getting any cut of any sort.
so, so I guess what I'm wondering is, or what I can imagine being a student in your class and there being a general levity
Yes.
and
Yes.
a kind of almost like uh I can almost like there being a chaotic nature to like just there's so much you have so much life force just
Yeah.
coming out of you. You know what I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And it's like and it just it beams out of you and it has this flavor of love and interest and curiosity and joie de vivre and all these kinds of things. Um and also every once in a while, or actually not every once in a while, kind of a part of the flavor of you is this laser focus on the other person.
Uh-huh.
And so as you're saying, I, I'm wondering if you have words for relative to other teachers, how focused are you on kind of the students themselves? And I wanted to bring back this thing you said about touch. And I know that's it's a potentially dicey subject in our era, but just how touch was a thing for you as a teacher, just actually like physically making contact, like hand on the shoulder of a student kind of a thing.
Exactly.
You know, these
Exactly.
kinds of things.
I
Is
mean,
that
that was a risk, and you can tell if this laser focus. I do have that. You can tell those kids that they don't even want a word of encouragement from you, much less a touch or anything of that sort. So,
mhm,
but
mhm.
my father's Greek. My brothers, we all kiss one another on the mouth. My daddy is, he's gone now, but we always were very physical. We played tickle
Mhm.
games, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, yeah,
And so,
yeah.
I'm the oldest of the 9 kids. Very physical with my, bathing your siblings and
Mhm.
them sitting on your lap and you're reading them, and then my own 2 children. So yes, I am a physical. My wife here, in our advanced years, we still make love regularly. I'm a very physical person, and
Uh-huh.
uh, and I think relative to other teachers, I mean, this was something of a scandal, I think, for some people, but other people thought it was at least charming, and other people really were. You know how we twos can be seductive, and
Sure.
I
Yep.
do think that I do have those gifts of being able to make people at ease enough and enjoy, whether it's the class or whatever. Um, I could not, because I think because of my one side too, if you want to use it that one side also. Um, I can't take chaos in a classroom for very long. I
Mhm.
think I have a sense of the tempo of things, and it's perfectly appropriate to have chaos at times. But if you're
Mhm.
really following the arc of a lesson plan and so forth, which I always was doing, ready to let extenuating circumstances intervene and present something richer and more important, um,
Yeah.
I nonetheless would, dudes, come on, back here. Let's,
Mhm. Mhm.
whether that's going rather quickly to 8 to control, but I don't think I did it in an unhealthy way. I would do it playfully. If they forced me, I mean, I could definitely say, I would normally simply lower my head and get quiet, and they knew. I mean, I wasn't teaching. I was teaching in Catholic schools, um,
Mhm.
by and large, where
Yeah.
discipline was never a problem to speak of. I
Yeah.
mean, if I
Yeah.
had a kid, I mean, I remember one kid um, acting up and was really, really, and I just pointed to him and I started walking toward the door and had him, he followed me outside and I closed the door. Everybody was dead quiet. Um,
Mm.
and I just shrugged my shoulders. Talk to me. What's happening?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
divide and conquer. I knew that I had to get him out of that setting where he had the audience. But
Yeah.
and he said something, and I said, well, if you want to take some time right now, um, that's fine. But I would like you to come back in 5 or 10 minutes, and let's continue. And let's not continue this for sure. I
Sure.
didn't have discipline problems by and large because I had that balance. I think I worked on the balance. I didn't always succeed, but I worked on
Mhm.
having that balance between let's enjoy this and let's keep the momentum of the dialogue going. Um,
Yeah.
but also I am expecting you to finish this paper, and if we have an exam coming, that there were criteria for the grade that made
Yeah.
some of them get C's and D's. So
Here's okay. I have a question I'm kind of honing in
good,
on in my
good. It's
yeah,
coming.
kind of
I see
arising.
it, Josh.
Yeah.
I see
Yeah. Yeah.
you got it. I see you move your body. You're ready. You're ready. Hit me. Hit me.
Okay.
Hit me with it.
Um, do you have a way of articulating the kind of underlying, you could almost call it like a unifying principle of your teaching and mentorship, and how central your relationship with your personal relationship with the student is to that thing? Actually, let me say, so that's one way of stating the question. Another way of stating the question is, um, what are you what are you at the end of the day hoping to give or to a student, or hoping that a student walks away from your class or your mentorship with?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And what is the your relationship being a conduit for it?
Yeah. Yeah.
How
I
important is that?
um I mean, not just the ideal, which I express to my students with people like Alfred North Whitehead, The Aims of Education. If you haven't read that book, it's a brilliant little book. Um, uh, Power. I want my kids to feel powerful with regard to their self-confidence, their articulation and ability to argue their ideas and their positions, their humility to be able to shift their positions, um, not to I see myself as a catalyst for as a teacher. I was a catalyst for trying to create this sort of combustion that would end with their leaving the room. And to me, the best were sort of like you could see it on their faces, and I felt it too, because I'm not looking at the clock, and they're not. And we're engaged, and all of a sudden the class is over. I mean, what? That's what you want the whole of life to be like. That's so. That's
Yeah,
to me.
combustion is a good word
Yeah, to
for it.
me,
Yeah.
I was excited that we should have a good time, that we should grow, that you should feel powerful, you should feel autonomous, you should think your own thoughts, have your own values. My children don't share my religious faith or anything of that sort. They
Mhm.
respect me, my two children, and my men's group. We argue about things, but as a two, I'm going to say, well, let's go get a beer. I'm not going to fold my arms like a one and say, well, next, see you next time, and just pull away because they didn't understand the truth as well as they could have. I do believe in truth, but I
Yeah.
also think that the best thing for human beings is to have healthy relationships that make them continue to hang into the dialogue and to continue the relating, and not to cut one another off, and not to you know
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm kind of sensing underneath everything you're saying, is that there's so many different ways to be a teacher, and some teachers focus, for example, more on the subject matter
That's right.
than on
Yep.
the relationships.
That's right.
And it seems that for you, the relationship is the essential container in which the subject matter comes alive and actually takes root in the other person. And so this, like, let's grab a beer, is a certain or whatever, any
That's
kind
right.
of relational
That's right.
move
That's right.
is
That's right.
is a way to what just both kind of let's see, let me get the words. It's like it's a way to
Live and keep life going and keep the energy and the juice. I heard
uh-huh.
your psychologist that you interviewed. I watched a bit of his thing. He uses that word juice,
Oh,
and I know
Nicholas. Yeah, yeah.
I know
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know John Lukovich uses that juicy word too for the sexual, as opposed to or by contrast with the social and the self pres. But in any event, I care about that juice a lot if I bring it to consciousness in that way.
Mhm.
And I want I don't think I am. I take personally the fact that some kids are just going to be not interested. I don't
Hmm.
think I take that personally. I did have to cultivate attention as best I could without interfering to those students who weren't as enthusiastic for the dialectic.
I'm curious about that. Yeah. So
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happens?
Well,
What happens
I would
for? Yeah.
ask them. I would ask them, and in class, I tried not to, because I knew that my tendency would be to be drawn to those who were enthusiastic about what we were doing, even if they disagreed. They were engaging. See, where the energy was, I wanted to be, and I wanted to create an environment in which there would be more than less energy, and where those
Hmm.
kids were laid back or suspicious or antagonistic even, um, I would try to involve them as much as I could, um, seduce them even, if you will, by virtue of bringing up things that they might, or ask them. Well, I would go to them and, well, what do you think about this? You
Yeah.
don't seem to be. Maybe I'm not judging where you are right now, but you don't seem engaged in any way. Are you thinking any thoughts about this, and finding yourself skeptical about what we're talking about, or how would you articulate? So I would give myself a B minus with pulling in consistently enough the kids who had their arms folded or were sleeping or were whatever, you
Right.
know.
Right.
Whereas I
Right.
would give myself more closer to a solid A with the other kids who were taking notes and who were engaged and
Yeah.
may have been sleepy or
Yeah.
whatever.
And there's that kind of going to the other person. Like
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the earlier in our conversation, we're talking about this radar you have about who's connected, who's removed.
Yep. Yep.
And these more removed students, your tendency is to kind of go towards them, try to draw them out, bring them into the general combustion
I
engine,
would say
you
that
know?
I would say that I could have been nourished completely personally
Hmm.
by those who were engaged. But
Sure.
my tentacles were alert to the others because I think I had a moral responsibility to them as
Sure.
much as to the others.
Yeah.
And the others were easy to deal with. The more difficult ones, I cultivated the practice of engaging the unengaged.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I want to split a hair because on the one hand, classroom dynamics is just a general teacher competence, and obviously in almost any classroom, you're going to have some people more or less engaged. But there's a what I'm pointing to is or what I'm curious to unpack is your kind of inner relationship with the journey. It seems that you went on in terms of, or I'm wondering if it was like this, like earlier in your teaching career, did you feel more of like an inner insistence to try to bring them in, and then later relaxed yourself to kind of let them come on their own terms without forcing it, without going to them as much? Is
I
that a
would say
fair way to
yes. I would
characterize it?
say, especially I remember exactly how I was in some of my first classes in
Mhm.
1970, teaching introduction to philosophy and so
Yeah.
forth at Spring Hill
Yeah.
College in Mobile, and I can remember that I certainly had a script somewhat in mind. I had not yet acquired that facility for really being able to give and take as much, and the tentacles were more on the subject and my facilitation of the subject matter. I acquired other than the natural two-ness, I acquired that sensitivity to knowing where the kids were and knowing what time of day it was, what period of the day it was, because that affects that, what day of the week it was,
Right.
all of those things. If it's a Monday, if it's a Friday, if it's in February, or if it's the end of May, all those things grew in my because it took so much in the beginning just to acquire facility with the subject matter so that you could speak about
Hmm.
ethics and values and a hierarchy of such and so forth and so on, all the different language and vocabulary that we use in our specialties.
Right.
And as
Right.
a young teacher, you really are focused more on, um, and that's the way I think we were taught initially. But I read an article when I was probably 20, when I was still a student in college. I read an article in which the presenter said, "Well, there are those teachers who give answers, There are those teachers who give the questions with the answers. There are those teachers who simply give questions and you have to come up with the answers. Then there are those teachers who create an environment in which the questions and the answers come from the students. Boy, was I taken by that.
Wow.
I mean, look, I just presented it. I hadn't thought about it in a while, but I just
Uh-huh.
presented the four types of teachers there. And
Mhm.
I wanted to be that fourth type that created an environment in which the questions and the answers, the whole ball game was basic, like Socrates tried anyway to do by engaging and not, of course, there's a lot of irony in that whole thing. As we know, he was leading his students very much down a particular path, more than I, for sure. But uh, yeah, I think there was an arc to my growth from being less facile with um, the poorer students and the time of day, and to becoming more inclusive of all the variables with the students as the center, and the individuals and the day and all of that factoring in
Sure.
to
Yeah.
okay, what is possible in this hour given this group. And you have three or four different groups. I mean, just think about that. No two groups are alike. The chemistry in each class is different, and you've got to be ready to deal with what you've got. If I can only get through this, I mean, there'd be those times when it was pulling teeth, and there was no way. They would yawn. Y'all would yawn in the face of Christ, and that ain't my face. That ain't my face. You know. So anyway, I acquired a lot over the close to 50 years of teaching.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, okay, I have a new topic for you.
Okay, please.
Um, let's see. I'm consulting my notes here.
Yeah, good. It's about time. I didn't want to think you were so talented that you really had this.
So funny.
No, I don't. I don't. I
So,
would love for you to be that talented, and there are people who are just phenomenal. I already think you're rather phenomenal at being able to do all of this. I liked the way you dealt with the other two. And there's a typical two thing that I wrote down in my notes when you mentioned John's partner.
uh-huh.
I had met Alessandra, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I had met her at my son's wedding, but I met so many people of his that I had forgot. But I texted you that I did remember her
Yes.
because I didn't want John to get word. Here it's a two. I didn't want
Yeah. Yeah.
John
Yeah. Yeah.
to think
Uh-huh.
less of me for forgetting that I had met his beloved.
That is such a good moment. That's such a good moment because we use the word superego sometimes when we talk about type
Oh yeah.
two. It's
Oh
the
yeah.
superego of
Oh yeah.
uh, just needing to be this
Yeah.
basically
I
perfect
I didn't have
looking
to
good.
text you. I
Yeah.
could have let that lie. you
Yeah.
know. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but and what was even the likelihood that John would even hear that I did
Zero.
not remember meeting his beloved? Hard, hard.
Right. Right.
But there was that little compulsion in the
Uh-huh.
two to
Yeah.
check the boxes and make sure you're protected, or that you know. But I saw that in me when I was texting you, and thought, well, there you go, right there.
That's excellent. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's great.
I can remember one thing came up, and my mother once, and I think she was partially thinking of my grandmother, my father's mother, but my mother once called me a hypocrite,
Okay.
and I do think that twos run the risk of being less sincere, more grandiose, and more promising. The superego is rather large and looming, and so I do think sometimes we don't measure up to the level of enthusiasm and promise that we make or present, and so I think that is somewhat what my mother, a strong one, would say. Well, you're being hypocritical, Bobby. You
Yeah. This is a really interesting and I think important point about the two because the two it's in the heart center. there's this there's a distance between their image and their identity. And so the image of two we talk about as being, um, I need to be this selfless, giving, loving person. And so, as you've been saying, you can sort of overemphasize that or kind of be insincere in your expression of love or affection or appreciation or whatever,
Yeah.
um, to keep yourself in alignment, in
With
congruence with
that,
your image.
that's right, with the
That
image.
image. That's right. Yeah. Um,
And as I was saying about
yeah.
the
What else?
saints,
Yeah.
as I was saying about the saints and the lives of great people and so forth that you emulate, if you've
Right.
acquired a super ego from the superheroes in our species at that level of goodness and
Totally.
holiness and all of that, then there's no way you're going to succeed. And yet, because of your nature, you profess these things.
That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
What's been your relationship over time in terms of your humanness relative to the angels or saints or that you emulate?
Um, I don't want to claim something that isn't me, but I do think that I take my place in with humanity. That's one of the things I love about going to church is that I love when everybody's going up to the Eucharist and you see all kinds of people, and I'm a looker, I'm a gazer, I'm a gazer, and I'm looking around at everybody in the church and everybody going to communion and coming back from communion. Even after I've received communion, I'm not just absorbed in my faith about the Eucharist itself, but I'm enjoying humanity, and I really do feel that I'm part of this scene, and that I'm nourished by being an imperfect part of this scene, so that I don't I think I profess a standard that I don't hold myself to in my imagination. I mean, I think I'm very aware of when I fall short of
Uh-huh.
the ideals that I profess.
Yeah.
And I remember Teresa of Avila in her autobiography. She says, I was once tempted to stop being the mistress of novices because I'm professing to these young women um, in areas where I'm still sinning. She says, I'm still falling short myself. Who am I to be? And she said, I saw that as a temptation from as she would word it, a temptation from the devil to quit this good work that I'm doing. I don't have to measure up to this ideal that I'm teaching or preaching or whatever. I should continue to preach it and not claim it as I like St. Paul and many of them did. I keep pushing on trying to achieve this goal, but I am far from it. So I think I've given myself a pass and a break, even as I have seen myself make mistakes and fail in relationships and in my self image projected onto my teaching with my students or my relationships with my colleagues or whatever. Um, I mean, I think I go to four pretty easily when it comes. I can remember I would go to movies by myself when I was a
Oh, you
kid,
mentioned, right. Yep.
and I would
Yep.
do all kinds of things, and I would take the phone off the hook when when and even now, I mean, I just cannot answer everybody who calls me, and I don't think I'm called to answer everybody who calls me on the phone. I will get
Mhm.
back to some people, and I'm talking about people whom I recognize on my phone as friends who are calling for whatever reason. I take care of myself, uh, I think pretty well, um,
Mhm.
when it comes to my own needs and acknowledging my needs. My wife would think sometimes that you know I I don't own um, certain emotions. Like she would say, you Bob, you act as though your feelings don't get hurt. She would say at times, this is a
Sure.
good, yeah. And I would say,
Yeah, yeah.
well,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that's how it looks to you, honey. But I mean, I'm disappointed right now, but I'm not taking personally. the fact that Simon or Mary or somebody else let me down or whatever. I mean, I may be, like I said, I tend to be more sad about certain things rather than angry or, well, I'll show you, or, vengeful or anything of that sort.
Right, right, right. Um, I have to say, you're so fun. you're so you have so much energy and positivity,
I do
and
think I have a
yeah,
lot of that. I think I do have a lot of that. Yeah,
mhm,
yeah,
yeah.
I do. Um, Go ahead, though.
I was gonna say,
Yeah, let's get the other side. Come on, we're coming up with something here, Josh. Come on, let's get me.
that's
Come on, let's get you got the right in there. Now let's get the left.
it's it's so funny. I mean, I've done a lot of these interviews, but the way the way you are paying attention to me, like these little moments that you notice, it's funny. It's very funny. It's disarming. um, One thing that I find fascinating is this, like for example, with friends of mine that are, I would call it. Let's see what words I would use. As unrelentingly positive as you are, um, I also find that I have a certain skepticism about like their real inner state, quote unquote, the
Absolutely,
real inner state. And
absolutely.
there's a way that I can tell with people that I've known for a long time, when they are spinning on a positive narrative that's not congruent with their real inner state versus when they're expressing real positivity from that is actually connected. And do you track that in
I
yourself?
do.
Are you able?
I
Yeah.
do. I think I try to back off from the overstatement, the grandiosity. I am conscious of that.
Hmm.
When I was
Hmm.
younger, I was not conscious of that.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
would be, one of my friends, when I entered the Jesuits, said, it was still to this day, we're still friends. And he'll say, "Oh, Fecas, I remember the first time I saw you and you just lit up and came forward and said, 'Hi, I'm Bob Fecas. I'm from Charleston, South,' because we were just all getting to know one another. Imagine
Right.
having 4 years of not going home. Our parents could come once a year to see us. 4 years with
Whoa.
the
Okay.
I know with it
Yeah.
was like a monastic order, which the Jesuits are not. I mean, we did go out. We went out and served and did all kinds of work in the community, but we were really so. And he said, Ficus, you were just too much, and I blush. I blush when I think of that because I know how I was. I was chosen by the first grade teacher to come to the parent night that I can't remember if I told you that. And I sat on a chair. I still remember it vividly. Sat on a chair, and the parents were listening and laughing and just really having a good time with me alone in that little auditorium.
Hmm.
So the grandiosity and the overstatement and the inflated ego thing is a real thing, which I see as a tempting thing. It's like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, trying that
That's right.
the
Yeah.
leaning in thing.
Yeah.
But I do also think that it's genuine. My positive nature really is genuine. I have digested, to some degree, the tradition that I believe in, both at the level of theology and philosophy and, you know, uh, society, the way I see that things should go, um, for the poor, etc. Um, and
Yeah.
so um, I think I've kept a fair number of good friends over the years, partially because um, I am more sincere than less. I am more genuine than less. Um, and that has a history in my parents, my father for sure, um, but also in the vision that I got early on through religion and then philosophy and all the studies that I've done in sociology and all the literature, et cetera, et cetera.
The positivity thing it's really fascinating to me because it's not my reflex. My tendency is to need to mine the darkness for as much as whatever is there. What's so interesting to me about, and we would call it the 2-7 stem that you have in your type structure, it's like there's an insistence or a loyalty to the redemptive side of life.
There is. You're
You
absolutely
know,
right. You're right.
more it's like that over in a state of like if something triggers you or you can see yourself going to the emptiness or the darkness or whatever, there's a that loyalty is stronger than the pull into the darkness. And
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
yeah,
I would say you could put it that way, and you could also say, should it be true, by the way, should it be true that this faith has any connection with reality, it might be that it's not just the subjective side, but maybe I am pulled toward not just by habit, subjective habit, but maybe grace. Yeah, I mean, I'll use that word,
sure.
maybe grace touches my heart at moments like that to encourage me to go forward and not to be overwhelmed by my failings and or other people's failings or
Mhm.
but yes, no, you're right. There is that redemptive thing.
So how do
Absolutely.
you so how do you know when you are spiritually bypassing something versus really honoring it and digesting it and in kind of learning from it?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And I think, uh, when I was reading back in college, when I first read Ludwig Feuerbach, the great atheist who influenced Freud and Nietzsche and uh, Marx and others, woo, was I thrown for a loop there.
Hmm.
And I mean, I'm studying to be a priest. I couldn't even say the creed at that time because I was wrapped up in the whole issue of projection. How much of quote the divine is just a projection, a wish fulfillment in the superego thing and all of that. And
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I went through a difficult patch there, and I continued to read and study and found arguments to the contrary of Feuerbach, and then went on and to read more and more and more. And I just have to date. Could things change? Could I lose my faith? Yes, I do believe I could. Like I used to say when I was teaching my kids when we would do segments in sexual ethics, marriage, all of that. Um, could Catherine and I get divorced after telling all kinds of wonderful stories about my life with my wife and with our children? Could my wife and I get divorced? Yes, we absolutely could. I don't see,
Mhm.
I mean, we continue to work on it. I don't think that's going to happen, but I'm no exception to what can happen to anybody. So I could lose my faith. I could, lose my relationship with my wife. Um, so, what about repression? You're asking me,
Right.
are you
Yeah.
conscious of repression? Um,
Hmm.
you, you know, I think I would give myself, probably a B minus, a B in that area. I'm sure that I bypass certain things because I maybe am too tired, or I mean, all the excuses we can give and make for why we don't go to the shadow and just uh, you know dwell in the shadow land
Yeah.
and just let it reveal what it's going to reveal. But I think I have. And I even recently have looked at more of the shadow, my shadow, all of that. And I'm sort of comfortable with, to some extent, not that it doesn't leave me a little unsettled when I read through all the negative things about the two, all the negative, by comparison with the positivity that you're talking about. And
Right.
when I
Right.
read about the negative things about the two and I recognize them in me, I mean, I can be a little unsettled by that because it's
Yeah.
true, because it's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
But and I don't go back and reclaim the positive at the expense of the truth and the negative. I just know that it's there, and I need to own it when it's impinging, especially when it's impinging on my psyche. And if I'm in one of those down states, I don't
Hmm.
always put on music. I don't always go for a walk. I don't always try to assuage the pain of um, the non-positive. I do think that, but I don't think, this is my strong belief. I don't think that the negative and the positive are equally. Um, I think that being is in our favor, and I think we're being called to greater manifestation of being, and in other words, hope. I have I have hope that that our species can um, continue to make some progress, even in the face of what we're going through right now. Um, I still continue to hope. I'm not blind. I look at and listen to the news and try to be in touch with what's really going on within me, whether I'm listening to news or whether I'm just my wife and I are apart right now, and because she's taking care of our grandchild, as I told you, in New Orleans. And so this is a both. I like to be alone, but I miss her and I miss our times together and so forth. And I try to be present to the and not repress
Mm-hmm.
the loneliness that I feel sometimes, and the
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to. I'm not just trying to present myself as balanced. I think I have worked on balance, and
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
I think I continue to work on balance. And I would give myself a B plus A minus for balance.
Sure. Yeah. This is a I guess this is a blunt question. What's like the most unhealthy you've been in your life, psychologically speaking?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would say probably um, when I was reading Feuerbach and was in
Uh-huh.
somewhat of a faith crisis.
Right.
And I
Yep.
was also having, there we are, stuck all guys together, and um, and that's around the same time that my good buddy there was beginning to back away, and
Mm.
uh, that was also related. That was also the time when I was extremely low weight, and I fainted giving the homily that we all had. I think I told you that the
You
last
told
time
me
we
about it.
talked.
Yeah,
That
sorry.
I do think I was going through a real difficult time of, and one of my best closest friends gave me a book that was about repression and psychological health, and how we balance things and so forth. And I was reading that and being benefited by that. But that was a dark time for me. And
Yeah.
I wrote about it all. I mean, I've kept a journal since I was 18. And
Hmm. Hmm.
so the journal has been a constant companion and help to me
I
to
see.
so I
Yeah.
would say that was the most difficult time at feeling good about myself, at
Right.
feeling healthy, um,
Yeah.
feeling even
Yeah.
tension in the head area,
Sure. Sure.
trying to sort these things all out, both at the level of philosophy and theology and friendships and diet. Diet meaning I needed to get more food and,
Right.
and
Right.
hold on more weight and all of that. So that was a really difficult spot, I would say, that I was in. That was not a healthy time in certain ways for me.
Sure. Yeah. Did you find that your two patterns kind of activated in a more intense way during that time than other times?
As I look back, not having had that knowledge that we have now, I would say probably the unhealthy. I mean, I felt victimized in certain ways
Sure.
by the universe, by by the negative forces that were undermining this quote path that I was on, that I thought I was called to, the mission that I felt called to, and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so uh, I would say that probably the unhealthy aspects of the two were more activated at that time. Not striking out at anybody, I mean, but feel,
Yeah.
for example, I remember I didn't go to classes after I had fainted and that the next day I was just in bed recuperating. Was it a nervous breakdown? Was it related more to the fact that I hadn't eaten? We had this big history exam that day that I had stayed up so late studying for, and all, not being able to sort out where I was with my own path, where I was, and certain friends had already left the Jesuits, the Society of Jesus, and and we were there with fewer people than we were when we entered, um,
Mm-hmm.
and not did I take more personally the suffering that I was going through, like a two might do, at that phase. Um, um, it's hard to remember everything, but I mean, that was also a period at which I was rediscovering how I was going to study, which was really important, studying. And I remember reconciling myself to getting C's and D's while I was digesting this methodology that I was creating for myself. And finally, I was getting A's and B's by the time I finished my college work and got into graduate school and so forth, because I didn't dissipate so much of my energy. But that piece of it, that feeling like, gosh, my grades are low, other people are succeeding, nobody else fainted giving their
Right, right.
presentation, So,
Yeah.
um, uh,
It brings up an interesting question about crisis of faith and meaning
uh-huh.
versus what you might call going down the levels of health in the Don Riso framework.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Because I'm contrasting my experience
Yes, yes.
internally with yours, and I'm thinking about, like, for example, when I was in college, I was both depressed and, I think, unhealthy in terms of the, like, Don Riso levels, and doing the things that threes do when they're not healthy, like presenting a certain image of I'm doing great. I'm
Yeah.
going out every night. I'm doing, I'm being friends with people. I'm showing up with a smile and a handshake,
Oh, God
and
bless
and
you. I have a dear friend. I have some threes that I love so much who I know what you're
yeah.
saying. And they're in
And
pain.
meanwhile,
You're in pain.
I was literally like crying every day in my room,
Gotcha.
and also um, cutting corners in school and desperate for my the approval of my professors, and just all the things
Yeah.
that you read about in the unhealthy
Yeah.
side of three. It was very bad. And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's not this. It certainly was a crisis of meaning, but it was like, I'm not hearing from this time that you had in your life that was very hard, the same kind of like, oh, when I was down there, I was being super intrusive towards people and hostile and kind of taking on, like, in the way that unhealthy twos can get in the Don Risa levels framework.
That's right. That's
You know
right.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I don't think that, I mean, I was suffering, no
sure.
question that I was
That's right.
suffering,
Yep.
but I wasn't seeing other people as the cause of it.
Yeah.
As
No.
a matter of fact, I thought, that I even had some assistance. I mean, my good buddy who was turning his back on me, um, I didn't give up my love for him, and I had other friends, and I just felt that because of my vision, I'm sure of reality, even though that was being significantly questioned by the reading I was doing and the studying I was doing, and
Right. Right.
um, I still had this sense that I could weather this, that
Yeah.
things were going to happen. I've always had this sense of context being really important for your suffering and your joys, um, and so if I knew that in a matter of a month we were going to be going to the camp on Southwest Louisiana, where we would go and read and fish and boat and all of that stuff. I mean, I would always try to see things, place my present suffering in the context of relief. I mean, I got relief by thinking of the things that would be relieving me soon enough.
Uh
Uh,
huh.
so
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and and uh, so this friend has turned his back on me, and this causes me tears and pain. But
Hmm.
I have this other friend who's consoling me, and who understands, and and I have my journal here that I can talk to, and then I'm going to the Eucharist later on. So I mean, I'm trying to
Yeah.
flesh out the environment in which I am experiencing this suffering or this pain. I didn't,
Sure.
um, turn to alcohol or sex or any of the standard kinds of reliefs that we as human beings can clutch for assuaging our pain.
I'm kind of wondering what else
Yeah,
that we haven't explored in
yeah,
two space.
yeah. I think
Um,
I think I think one area which you have brought up, and so much of the literature does that, because of this inflated image that the two has of himself and so forth, that there can be this emptiness when they really settle into where they really are and they recognize their motives more honestly. And in those moments of truth,
right.
does the two experience a kind of emptiness because the superego
Yeah.
has just been burst or something like that.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so that emptiness, I recognize that experience of uh, grandiosity when it's blown off the map here, when it's not figuring. What is one left with when one doesn't have that inflated sense of self? And I still go back to, and I do feel sometimes, some people would say it's maybe a kind of, not exactly depression, but that it is a kind of low, or it's certainly, by contrast with the image that the two gives, it certainly seems like, whoa, like something like clinical depression or something. Whereas what I find I do is I go for a walk, or I put on music, or I nourish myself in ways that will help me write out the sense of empty isn't exactly the word. It's more like a low. It's a low affect, and
Hmm.
um
Hmm.
and I have a whole uh, you know chest of tools that I draw on. Uh,
Yeah.
Take a nap, meditate, listen to music, go get some exercise. All
Yeah.
those things that good therapists would encourage you to do. I certainly espouse all of those things, but I do think that there is that kind of low or empty experience. I would also chalk it up in my spiritual lingo to, the dark night of the soul that John of the Cross and others write about. There are moments when I think I, who have been so blessed and fortunate, are being purged of any attachment to the higher, um, ecstatic. We 2's and 7's can be ecstasy junkies in their various realms of working, and I think the ecstatic is lovely, but it's not really um, what we're called to. We're called
Hmm.
to what the moment is putting on our plate, and
Hmm.
we're called to deal with whatever the moment is putting on our plate. And when I've had those lower moments, or what in the scripture, the Hebrew scriptures, they talk about the bread of sorrows and the bread of consolations. And then Jesus, a good Jew, says, in the Lord's Prayer, he says, "Give us this day our daily bread." And I think we're given bitter and sweet bread alternately at different times. Some people get far more sweet, consoling bread. Some people get bitter, more sorrowful bread. I feel like I want to eat what is, and that's not just the ideal. I really work at trying to eat what is in the present moment. And
Hmm.
if it's to be a low affect and a less stimulation or less um, pleasing content, uh, you know, I want to be there. I want to be there in
Hmm.
reality. That's where I really want to be, and I foster that with meditation.
Right. Right. Well, thanks for first of all, doing this with me and also being willing to kind of explore this darker territory. I
And
really
Josh, if
appreciate it.
I come up with if I come up with something that is really more telling at that darker level, I may be I may be more superficial. Should the dark side be as weighty as the bright side, I may be more superficial than you need for presenting the two. But in any event, if I come up with something that I think is a significant event, that would reveal how I, as a two, dealt with the dark side, the shadow, I can get in touch with you, right?
That'd be great. Please do. So thank you again. What's this been like for you,
Um,
this
I
conversation?
mean, I was, isn't it interesting? I mean, I was tired to begin with, and I was in typical two fashion thinking, I hope I will be worth his time. But again, the distinction, am I trying to please Josh, or am I trying to really assist Josh in his work? I mean, I think I even thought last night while I was working on my novella, well, I mean,
Yeah.
Josh's work is as important as my work, for God's sakes, so let's try to get some sleep. I put it down and got some rest so that I could. So I was feeling a little anxious about whether or not I could measure up, but then the stimulating questions and the subject matter made it possible to rise to the occasion to some extent, at least. You be the judge.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and it's lovely to chat with you.
You're welcome. You're
Yeah, thank
welcome,
you.
and best of luck. I'm going to go back and look at your article with more intention, because I'm interested in that missing, the missing and the gaze and so forth.
Oh, that'll be a
So,
good follow up. Yeah.
yeah.
That'll be a good follow up. Okay.
All right, brother.
Thanks, Bob. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to my interview with Bob Fecas. If you like Bob and you'd like to check out his writings, or you want to learn more about his work as a spiritual director and advisor, you can check out his website at bobfecas.com. I'll put a link in the show notes. If you are watching this on YouTube and you like the show and you like this interview, then please click the like button, or I invite you to also subscribe to our channel. It's a zero cost and very effective way to support me and my work and the Enneagram School. Likewise, if you're listening to this as a podcast, then you can leave up to a 5-star review and also leave some words about what you like about the show. Really appreciate that, and it helps a lot. If you'd like to stay up to date with what's going on at the Enneagram School, then I invite you to come check out our website at theenneagramschool.com. And while you're there, you can also subscribe to our email list, which is where we send updates about all the goings-on that are coming up. For example, I'm doing a live coaching series right now where on most Wednesdays, I am coaching someone, a volunteer, on a topic of their choice, and usually we know their Enneagram type in advance. And so it's a really interesting and great way to see someone's process in action and watch how, and if you are a coach, then you can come and geek out with me about coaching techniques. You can also watch how a person, given their Enneagram type, surfaces issues and processes them in real time. One other big announcement is that John Lukovich and I are almost done. I know I've been saying this for a long time. We're almost done with our first ever introduction to the Enneagram program that we'll be selling on the school's website. And so you can, if you want updates about when that's coming out, then you can subscribe to our email list. And if you're also curious about our original content and previous teachings, then we have a course already out. It's about our developmental view of the centers of intelligence and object relations. So it's a fresh take on the fundamental premise of the Enneagram, the centers, which are the body, heart, and mind, and the object relations that appear in each of those centers. If you think that you would be a great candidate for me to interview on the show, or you know someone who would be a great candidate for me to interview, then I would love for you to reach out to me. You can just do it right through the Enneagram School's website. Just go to the contact form, send me an email, and I'll get right back to you. Preference goes to people who have been officially typed by the team at Enneagrammer.com. I think that they have the world's most accurate Enneagram typing service. And while you're there, you can also check out their subscription service, where they put out a weekly video where they type a celebrity in real time. You can watch their very sharp and good insights. All right, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed the interview, and I will see you next time.